I'm Christy, 35, and I've spent 7 years building my real estate development company in Boston. The 5-bedroom Victorian I renovated myself was supposed to be my crowning achievement. Instead, it became the center of a family war when my father demanded I hand over my house to my pregnant sister Rachel and her gambling-addicted husband. My father always treated her like his golden child while I fought for every scrap of approval. Little did he know the DNA test results I discovered would change everything about our family forever. Before I get into this wild story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if family drama gets your attention. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Lexington, Massachusetts wasn't terrible on the surface. We had a decent house, regular meals, and no obvious problems that neighbors could see. But inside those walls, the emotional dynamics were quietly devastating. My father Marcus was always emotionally distant with me, while showering my sister Rachel with affection, praise, and material advantages. From my earliest memories, the disparity was clear but never acknowledged. I remember my 10th birthday when I received a basic bicycle, while Rachel, on her 10th birthday just 8 months earlier, had gotten a lavish party at an amusement park, plus an expensive bike with all the accessories. When I asked my father why the difference, he simply said, "Don't be ungrateful, Christy. Boys don't need all that fuss." That was the pattern throughout our childhood. My mother Evelyn recognized the favoritism, but her attempts to balance it were half-hearted at best. She'd occasionally slip me extra dessert or spend time with me alone when Dad took Rachel on their special outings. "Your father just connects better with Rachel," she'd explain, a shadow crossing her face that I couldn't interpret as a child. "But I love you just the same." Those words were meant to comfort, but they only confirmed what I already knew. Something about me wasn't enough for my father. High school brought the differences into sharper relief. When I made honor roll 3 semesters in a row, my accomplishment barely warranted a nod at dinner. When Rachel got a single A- amid her usual B's and C's, Dad took the family out to celebrate at the nicest restaurant in town. The college years made the division impossible to ignore. Rachel's education was fully funded tuition apartment spending money, while I was told I needed to learn responsibility by working my way through school. And work I did. I juggled 3 jobs simultaneously: morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening work at the campus library, and weekend hours at a construction company. The construction job, which I originally took just for the higher hourly wage, became unexpectedly significant. I discovered I had a knack for understanding buildings, materials, and spaces. The foreman Dave noticed my interest and began teaching me aspects of the business beyond just hammering nails. "Kid, you've got an eye for this work," he told me during my junior year. "You see how things come together. That's not something I can teach." Despite the exhaustion of working 35 hours a week while carrying a full course load, I graduated with a degree in business administration and 0 help from my father. Rachel, meanwhile, had changed majors 3 times before settling on communications, extending her college stay to 5 fully funded years. After graduation, I started at the bottom of Wilson Construction, the company where I'd worked through college. The pay was modest, but I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 other guys and saving every penny I could. Rachel, in contrast, received a down payment for her first condo as a graduation gift along with a new car. Over 5 years, I absorbed everything I could about construction materials, project management, and most importantly, real estate development. I volunteered for every difficult project, worked weekends, and spent evenings studying market trends and property values. My boss, Jeffrey Wilson, became the mentor my father never was. "Christy," he told me one evening as we reviewed plans for a small office building, "you're thinking bigger than this company. You should consider striking out on your own in a few years." He was right. By 28, I had saved enough to make a modest investment in a small, dilapidated property. I spent weekends and evenings renovating it myself, learning plumbing and electrical work through YouTube videos and advice from tradespeople I'd befriended over the years. 6 months later, I sold the property for a 40% profit and used that money for my next project. While I was building my business, brick by brick, Rachel's life followed a different pattern. Her first job at a marketing firm lasted less than a year before she quit, claiming her boss didn't appreciate her creativity. Dad paid her rent during the 3 months she spent finding herself before the next job, which lasted just 8 months. Then came a string of similar positions, none lasting longer than a year, with Dad always providing a financial safety net. Rachel's relationship choices followed a similar pattern of poor decisions rescued by parental intervention. First came Trevor, a musician who borrowed $3,000 from her for equipment and disappeared. Then Andrew, who moved into her condo and contributed nothing for 6 months. Each time Dad would step in with money and support, never suggesting she might need to make better choices. Gregory, her current husband, seemed different at first. He had a steady job in sales and a charming personality, but within a year of their relationship the signs appeared. Small gambling debts he needed help with, missed rent payments, borrowed money that was never repaid. Despite these red flags, Rachel married him last year, with Dad paying for an extravagant wedding. Throughout these years, my business, Christie Brothers Development, ironically named since I have no brothers, grew steadily. I developed a reputation for quality renovations of historic properties, preserving their character while updating them for modern living. Each successful project built my reputation and expanded my opportunities. 3 years ago, I found the property that would become my own home, a neglected Victorian in a transitioning neighborhood. The house had gorgeous bones, high ceilings, intricate woodwork, and large windows, but years of neglect had left it in desperate need of rehabilitation. I spent 18 months renovating it, doing much of the work myself in the evenings after managing my other projects. I restored the original hardwood floors, rebuilt the ornate staircase, and created a modern kitchen that respected the home's historic character. The 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house became more than just a place to live. It represented everything I had accomplished, despite the lack of support from my family. Every squeaky floorboard I fixed, every wall I painted, every tile I laid, was a testament to my determination to succeed on my own terms. The house became my sanctuary and my proudest achievement, a physical manifestation of overcoming my father's indifference. The invitation came from my mother on a Tuesday evening, as I was reviewing contracts for a new development project. "Christy, honey, I think it's time we had a family dinner at your new place. It's been 3 months since you moved in, and we still haven't seen it properly." Despite my complicated relationship with my family, I felt a flicker of excitement. Finally, a chance to show my father what I had accomplished. Maybe this would be the moment he'd acknowledge my success. I spent the next 3 days hiring a professional cleaning service to make the house spotless, planning an elaborate meal of my father's favorite foods, and even purchasing a bottle of the expensive scotch he preferred. Sunday arrived, and I felt a nervous energy as I put the finishing touches on my home. I had prepared a casual but impressive dinner: prime rib, my father's favorite, roasted vegetables from the farmer's market, and homemade bread rolls with my mother's favorite chocolate cake for dessert. Everything needed to be perfect. They arrived at 6, my father looking vaguely disinterested, my mother nervously excited, and Rachel with Gregory in tow, both eyeing the house critically from the moment they stepped through the front door. "Well, it's certainly big," my father commented without a hint of admiration, as I led them through the entryway with its restored parquet flooring and original stained glass window. "Christy did all the restoration work himself," my mother added, touching the polished walnut banister. "It's beautiful, honey." The house tour continued with similar dynamics, mother offering genuine compliments, father making non-committal noises, and Rachel and Gregory exchanging whispers I couldn't quite catch. When we reached the master suite with its large bay windows overlooking the garden, Rachel finally spoke directly. "This bedroom is almost as big as our entire apartment," she said, a note of resentment in her voice. "You've done well for yourself," Gregory added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Must be nice having all this space just for one person." Dinner began pleasantly enough. The food was well received, and my mother made efforts to keep the conversation flowing with questions about my recent projects and neighborhood. For a brief moment, I felt the warm glow of family connection I'd always craved. Then my father cleared his throat during a lull in conversation. "The house is impressive, Christy. More than I expected, to be honest." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given me about my work, and for a moment my heart lifted. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot coming from you." His next words shattered the moment. "Though it seems excessive for a single man, all these empty bedrooms going to waste." Before I could respond, Rachel reached for Gregory's hand and broke into a wide smile. "Well, speaking of family news, we have an announcement." She paused dramatically. "We're pregnant. The baby's due in February." The table erupted in excitement, my mother jumping up to hug Rachel, my father beaming with pride as he shook Gregory's hand. I offered my congratulations, sincerely despite the familiar sting of seeing how easily Rachel commanded our father's approval. "This is wonderful timing," my father said once the initial excitement had settled. "Rachel and Gregory have been looking for a larger place, especially now with the baby coming." I nodded politely. "The market in their area has some nice 3-bedroom options opening up. I'd be happy to help them look." Actually, my father interrupted, his tone shifting to the authoritative voice he used when making business decisions. "I've been thinking about a more practical solution." The room fell quiet. My mother suddenly became very interested in rearranging her silverware. "Christy, you have this enormous house with 4 empty bedrooms. Rachel and Gregory need more space for their growing family. It makes perfect sense for you to let them have this house." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "Let them have my house, as in sell it to them." My father waved his hand dismissively. "They couldn't afford to buy it outright now, of course. But you could move back into an apartment. You're just one person after all, and let them take over here. You can always find another house later when you have a family of your own." The casual way he suggested I abandon my home, the physical manifestation of years of hard work and sacrifice, left me speechless. Rachel, however, was nodding enthusiastically. "It would be perfect for us," she chimed in. "The nursery could go in the bedroom next to the master, and we could use the 3rd floor as a playroom once the baby's older." They were already mentally moving and rearranging my life's work to suit their needs. "This isn't just a house," I finally managed to say, struggling to keep my voice level. "This is my home. I spent 18 months renovating it myself. Every room represents hundreds of hours of my personal labor." "It's just business, Christy," my father replied with a hint of impatience. "You're in real estate development. You buy and sell properties all the time. My personal home isn't just business." I countered, feeling heat rise in my face. "Would you give up your house if I asked for it?" My father's expression hardened. "That's completely different. Your mother and I have built a life in our home. You're a single man with no attachments. This house is wasted on you." Those words, "wasted on you," cut deep, encapsulating a lifetime of being deemed less worthy than my sister. In that moment, I saw clearly that nothing I achieved would ever be enough to earn my father's respect. "I'm sorry," I said firmly, "but this house isn't available. I'd be happy to help Rachel and Gregory find something suitable within their budget, maybe help with renovations." "This isn't about money," my father interrupted, his voice rising. "This is about family. Your sister is having a baby. Your niece or nephew will need a proper home. If you cared about family at all, you'd want to help." And there it was, the familiar emotional manipulation, weaponizing family connections to make me feel selfish for maintaining boundaries. I'd experienced this tactic my entire life, but this time the stakes were too high to cave. "I do care about family," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure, "but giving up my home isn't a reasonable request. There are many ways I can support Rachel and Gregory that don't involve sacrificing everything I've worked for." The rest of the dinner deteriorated quickly. My father grew increasingly angry. My mother made weak attempts to soothe tensions, and Rachel alternated between tears and pointed comments about how much better she would utilize the space. By the time they left, the joyful family dinner I had hoped for had devolved into bitter accusations and slammed doors. Standing alone in my kitchen, surrounded by half-eaten food and dirty dishes, I felt the familiar ache of rejection coupled with something new. A simmering anger at the audacity of their demand, and a firm resolve not to yield. This house was mine, earned. Through years of struggle they had neither witnessed nor acknowledged, and I wouldn't give it up, not even for the sister who had always been deemed more deserving of everything. The morning after the disastrous dinner, I woke to 3 missed calls from my mother, and a text that read, "Your father is very upset. Please reconsider what we discussed." No mention of how I might be feeling after having my life's work dismissed as wasted on me. That afternoon my father called directly. "I'm disappointed in your selfishness," he said without preamble. "Rachel has been crying all night. "Dad, I understand you want to help Rachel, but asking me to give up my home isn't reasonable," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Family helps family," he countered. "Your mother and I sacrificed everything for you kids growing up." The selective memory was staggering. I wanted to remind him of all the times he hadn't sacrificed for me, the college tuition he refused to help with, the first apartment deposit he wouldn't co-sign, for the countless moments of emotional support withheld. Instead, I simply said, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I need to get back to work." That conversation set the pattern for the following weeks. Every family member became an unwelcome ambassador for Operation Take Christie's House. My mother called daily with tearful pleas about Rachel's difficult pregnancy and how much easier it would be in a larger home. My Aunt Susan, my father's sister, sent a lengthy email explaining how sharing my blessings would bring me greater joy than material possessions. Even my cousin Derek, who I'd been close with as a child, messaged me on Facebook, "Dude, it's just a house. Family comes first." None of them seemed to understand that to me it wasn't just a house. It was tangible proof that despite my father's lifelong dismissal, I had created something valuable and beautiful through my own efforts. Giving it up would mean surrendering not just property but the sense of self-worth I'd fought so hard to build. The pressure campaign extended beyond direct communications. One evening, scrolling through Facebook, I discovered my sister had posted a sonogram image with the caption, "Baby Wilson needs a home with room to grow. Praying for miracles and generous hearts." The comments section brimmed with family members offering support and thinly veiled references to certain people who could help but chose not to. I closed the app feeling sick to my stomach at being publicly cast as the villain in my family's drama. Just when I thought things couldn't get more intense, Rachel escalated to direct action. I arrived home from work on a Thursday afternoon to find her car in my driveway. She'd used the spare key my mother had from the dinner party to let herself and Gregory into my house along with an interior designer friend. When I walked in, they were in my living room, the designer sketching on a notepad while Rachel pointed at various features. The wall between the living room and study could come down to make a larger family space, she was saying. And upstairs, the smallest bedroom would make a perfect nursery with some pastel paint. "What are you doing in my house?" I demanded, struggling to contain my anger. Rachel turned, not even having the grace to look embarrassed. "We're just getting some preliminary ideas for when we move in. Dad said you've been difficult, but you'll come around eventually." "Get out," I said quietly, a calm born of absolute fury. "Get out now." "Don't be dramatic," Christy Gregory interjected, lounging on my sofa as if he owned it. "We're family. Your dad thinks." "I don't care what Dad thinks," I interrupted. "This is my home, purchased with my money, renovated with my hands. Neither of you has any right to be here planning renovations. Leave now, or I'm calling the police to remove you for trespassing." The designer, clearly uncomfortable, gathered her things quickly. "I didn't realize. I thought this was already arranged," she mumbled as she hurried out. Rachel stood, her ground color rising in her cheeks. "You've always been selfish," she spat. "Always thinking you're better than everyone because you work so hard. Some of us had real struggles, you know." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "Real struggles? Dad paid your college tuition, bought your first car, gave you the down payment for your condo. What exactly have you struggled with, Rachel?" "You have no idea what it's like being the daughter in this family," she retorted. "The expectations, the pressure to be perfect. You got to disappear into your work and be the independent son, while I had to be the one maintaining family connections, planning holidays, being there for Mom and Dad." In that moment, I glimpsed a perspective I'd never considered, that Rachel might have experienced her own form of family pressure, different but perhaps no less damaging than mine. But any empathy I might have felt evaporated with her next words. "You owe this family. After everything Mom and Dad did for you, the least you could do is help when we really need it." "I don't owe anyone my home," I said firmly. "And I need you to leave. Now." After they finally left, Rachel in tears, Gregory glowering, I changed the locks that same evening. The confrontation left me shaking with a mixture of rage and an unexpected grief. For the first time, I was standing firmly against my family's manipulation, and while it felt necessary, it also felt like severing a vital connection, however dysfunctional it might be. The family conflict began affecting my work, the one area of my life that had always been a refuge. During a crucial meeting about a new development project, I found myself staring blankly at spreadsheets, my mind replaying Rachel's words and my father's disappointment. My business partner Brandon noticed immediately. "You've read the same page 3 times," he observed after the clients left. "What's going on with you? This isn't like you, Christy." I hesitated, then shared the situation. Brandon listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly incredulous. "Let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "Your father wants you to give your sister your house, not sell it to her. Just hand it over because she's pregnant, and your entire family thinks this is reasonable." Hearing someone else summarize the situation highlighted its absurdity. "Basically, yes." Brandon shook his head. "That's not how family works, man. That's how exploitation works." His clear-eyed assessment was validating, but it didn't solve my immediate problem. The following week, distracted by yet another angry call from my father, I misread a crucial clause in a contract, nearly committing our company to a significant financial loss. Brandon caught the error before the documents were signed, but the close call was sobering. "This family situation is affecting your judgment," he warned. "You need to resolve it or step back temporarily. We can't afford mistakes like this." He was right, but I had no idea how to resolve a conflict where the other parties believed the only acceptable solution was my complete surrender. The stress began manifesting physically: insomnia, tension, headaches, a constant knot in my stomach. For the first time in my career, I found myself dreading work rather than finding refuge in it. The conflict reached beyond my immediate family to impact business relationships. At a networking event, I overheard a potential investor mention to another developer, "I heard Christie's having some family troubles, might not be stable enough for the Harrison Street project." The whispers were beginning to affect my professional reputation, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own. As weeks passed, the pressure didn't diminish, it transformed into something more insidious. Rather than direct confrontation, my family began a campaign of isolation. Family gatherings happened without invitations extended to me. Holiday plans were made excluding me. The message was clear: comply or be cast out. 6 weeks after the initial demand, I received a text from my mother. "Please come to Grandpa's 80th birthday lunch on Saturday. He specifically asked for you to be there." The message felt like an olive branch, and despite everything I missed my grandfather, he had always been kind to me, showing genuine interest in my construction projects, even when my father dismissed them. I arrived at my parents' house Saturday afternoon with a carefully chosen gift for Grandpa, a vintage book about Boston architecture that I'd found at a specialty shop. The atmosphere seemed artificially cheerful as I entered, with conversations pausing briefly before resuming with forced brightness. My grandfather greeted me warmly with a firm handshake that belied his age. "There's my builder," he said affectionately. "Your grandmother would have loved to see what you've done with that old Victorian." For a moment I relaxed, thinking perhaps this gathering could be a step toward healing the family rift. That illusion shattered during lunch when my father clinked his glass for attention. "Since we have the whole family together," he announced, "I think we should address the elephant in the room. As you all know, Rachel and Gregory are expecting their first child, the first great-grandchild for Dad." He nodded toward my grandfather. "They need a family home, and Christy has a 5-bedroom house he doesn't need." My stomach dropped as I realized the family gathering was actually an ambush. Around the table, aunts, uncles, and cousins nodded in agreement. My grandfather looked confused, clearly not having been briefed on this family conflict beforehand. "We've given Christy time to come to the right decision on his own," my father continued. "But with the baby coming in just a few months, we need resolution. I think he needs to hear from all of us how important family support is in times like these." What followed was a carefully orchestrated intervention. One by one, family members expressed their disappointment in my selfishness and urged me to do the right thing. My Uncle Robert spoke about sacrifices he'd made for family. Aunt Susan invoked my late grandmother, suggesting she would be ashamed of my behavior. Even my young cousins had clearly been coached to ask why I didn't want the new baby to have a nice home. Throughout the barrage, I remained silent, a strange calm settling over me as I recognized the full extent of the manipulation. My mother watched anxiously, occasionally trying to soften the harsher comments, but never actually defending me. Rachel sat with her hands resting protectively on her slightly rounded belly, tears streaming down her face for maximum effect. When everyone had spoken, my father delivered what he clearly viewed as the killing blow. "Christy, it's time to decide what matters more to you, a house or your family. Because I can tell you right now, if you continue to refuse to help your sister in her time of need, you're choosing not to be part of this family anymore." The table fell silent, all eyes on me. In that moment I felt a strange sense of clarity. The people around this table claimed to be family, yet not one of them, not even my mother, had considered what this demand might mean to me, how it might feel to be asked to surrender the tangible symbol of my hard work and independence. I stood up slowly, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've worked for everything I have without help from any of you. My home represents years of sacrifice and effort. I won't give it up because Rachel failed to plan for her future." I turned to my grandfather, genuine regret in my voice. "I'm sorry this overshadowed your birthday, Grandpa. I love you." Then I walked out, ignoring the eruption of voices behind me. In my car, the composure crumbled. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled away from the house where I'd grown up, feeling as though I'd just severed my last connection to my family. The drive home passed in a fog of grief and anger. That evening was the lowest point. Alone in the house I'd fought so hard to create and was now fighting to keep, I questioned everything. Was I being selfish? Was a house, even one that meant so much to me, worth losing my entire family over? The doubt was crippling, magnifying the silence of my empty home until it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a prison of my own making. Around midnight, desperate for connection with someone who might understand, I called my cousin Eliza. Unlike the rest of the family, she hadn't attended the ambush lunch, having moved to Seattle for work 2 years earlier. We'd always gotten along well, bonding over being somewhat outside the family's inner circle, me because of my father's indifference, her because of geographical distance. "It's not just about the house, is it?" she asked after I'd explained the situation. "It's about never being enough in Uncle Marcus's eyes." "Exactly," I admitted, relieved someone finally understood. "If I give in on this, I'm erasing everything I've built for myself. But fighting means losing my family." There was a long pause before Eliza spoke again, her voice hesitant. "Christy, there's something you should know. It might not help with your decision, but I've heard things over the years. About Aunt Evelyn and Uncle Marcus." "What kinds of things?" I asked, suddenly alert. "This is just family gossip, mind you, but my mom once told me that Aunt Evelyn had an affair before Rachel was born, with some college boyfriend who came back into her life briefly." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Are you saying Rachel might not be Dad's biological daughter?" "I don't know for sure," Eliza cautioned, "but the timing always seemed suspicious to Mom. And haven't you ever noticed that Rachel doesn't really look like Uncle Marcus? She doesn't have any of the Wilson features the rest of us share." Now that Eliza mentioned it, it was true. Rachel had never resembled our father or any of the Wilson relatives. I'd always assumed she simply took after our mother's side of the family, but even there, the resemblance wasn't strong. "This could explain so much," I said slowly, mind racing through memories with this new lens. The way Dad always overcompensated with Rachel, the different treatment. Maybe he spent 28 years trying to prove to himself that she's really his daughter, by loving her extra, Eliza suggested. Or maybe he knows the truth and has been trying to make up for it. Either way, it's not your burden to carry, Christy. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep, my mind spinning with this potential revelation. Could this explain the lifetime of differential treatment? Was my father's favoritism toward Rachel an elaborate compensation for private doubts about her paternity? The next morning, I began investigating discreetly. I found old family photo albums, studying Rachel's features compared to relatives on both sides. The more I looked, the more obvious the discrepancies became. Rachel had hazel eyes in a family of blue-eyed people. Her nose and jawline matched neither our father's family nor our mother's. I considered confronting my parents directly, but feared the explosive potential of such accusations without proof. Instead, I researched DNA testing options. The challenge would be obtaining samples without raising suspicions, especially given the current family rift. The opportunity came unexpectedly when my mother called a week later, her voice conciliatory. "Your father was too harsh at the lunch," she admitted. We all want to find a solution that works for everyone. Could you come over for coffee? Just you and me. Despite my wariness, I agreed. During the uncomfortable visit, I managed to collect what I needed: a hair from my father's brush in the bathroom, a tissue my mother discarded, and later, under the guise of reconciliation, a coffee cup Rachel had used when she stopped by. Unexpectedly during my visit, the next 3 weeks of waiting for DNA results were agonizing. I threw myself into work trying to repair the damage my distraction had caused to projects and relationships. Brandon noticed the change in my focus, but didn't press for details, simply offering his support. "Whatever you're working through, I've got your back," he said one evening, as we reviewed plans for a new development. When the email notification finally arrived with the DNA test results, my hand shook as I clicked to open it. The scientific language was complex, but the conclusion was unmistakable. Based on the genetic markers analyzed, Rachel and I shared maternal DNA, but not paternal. Rachel was my half-sister, not my father's biological daughter. The truth I now possessed felt both liberating and terrifying. It explained so much about my childhood, about the inexplicable favoritism that had shaped my sense of self-worth. Yet wielding this information came with enormous responsibility. This wasn't just my truth to reveal, it would impact multiple lives, potentially destroying the family completely. I sat alone in my office, long after everyone else had gone home, wrestling with what to do next. The house that had been the catalyst for this conflict now seemed almost secondary to the larger truth I'd uncovered. Whatever I decided, there would be no returning to the family dynamic I'd known my entire life. Everything would change. For a week, I carried the weight of the DNA test results, uncertain how to proceed. Finally, I reached out to Brandon, not just as a business partner, but as the closest thing I had to a trusted friend. "I need your perspective on something personal," I said, explaining the situation and showing him the test results. "I know the truth now, but I don't know what to do with it." Brandon considered carefully before responding. "This explains a lot, but it's explosive information. If you use it just to win the house argument, you'll destroy your family completely. Is that what you want?" His question forced me to examine my true motivations. Was I seeking justice for years of unfair treatment, or was I looking for a nuclear option to end the house conflict? Neither approach felt right. "I think I need professional help with this," I admitted. On Brandon's recommendation, I made an appointment with Dr. Patricia Winters, a family therapist. During our first session, I laid out the entire situation: the lifelong favoritism, the house demand, and the DNA discovery. "What's your goal here, Christy?" she asked. "Revenge, justice, resolution." I considered her question seriously. I want the pressure about my house to stop, but I guess I want to understand. All these years I thought there was something wrong with me, something that made me unlovable to my father. If this is why he favored Rachel, at least I'd know it wasn't my fault. Dr. Winters helped me develop a strategy for confrontation that wouldn't be purely destructive. "This revelation will be traumatic for everyone involved," she cautioned. "If you choose to share it, do so with care for the human beings who will be affected, including yourself." Following her advice, I arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant I occasionally used for business meetings. I invited only my parents and Rachel, telling them I wanted to discuss a compromise about the house situation. To my surprise, they agreed readily, perhaps thinking I was finally capitulating to their demands. When we gathered that evening, the tension was immediate. My father wore an expression of smug satisfaction, clearly expecting me to surrender. Rachel looked nervous but hopeful. My mother's anxiety was palpable as she fidgeted with her napkin. "Thank you for coming," I began formally. "Before we discuss the house, there are some things I need to say about our family dynamic." My father immediately tried to take control. "We're not here to discuss feelings, Christy. We're here about practical matters. Rachel's need for a family home. This is relevant," I insisted firmly. "For as long as I can remember, there's been a clear favoritism in our family. Rachel has received emotional and financial support that was never offered to me. I've spent years thinking there was something fundamentally unlovable about me that explained this difference." "That's ridiculous," my father scoffed. "We treated you both equally." "No, Marcus, we didn't," my mother interjected, quietly surprising all of us. "Christy's right about that much." My father turned to her, anger flashing across his face. "Whose side are you on, Evelyn?" "I'm not taking sides," she replied, a tremor in her voice. "But I can't sit here and pretend we didn't favor Rachel. We did. We always have." Rachel looked between our parents, confusion evident. "What are you talking about? Dad's always been tough on both of us." I took a deep breath, knowing we had reached the point of no return. "I believe I've discovered why the difference in treatment existed." I placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside is the result of a DNA test comparing genetic markers between Rachel, myself, Mom, and Dad. The room went completely still. My mother's face drained of color, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's expression shifted from anger to something unreadable. Rachel just looked confused. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "What DNA test?" Rather than answering directly, I continued calmly. "The test shows that while Rachel and I share maternal DNA, we do not share the same father. Rachel is not biologically Dad's daughter." The explosion I expected from my father didn't come. Instead, he sat completely motionless, staring at the envelope, as if it might detonate. It was my mother who reacted, a low, keening sound escaping her as she covered her face with both hands. Rachel lunged for the envelope, tearing it open and scanning the contents with increasingly frantic movements. "This is insane," she said, voice rising. "You're making this up because you don't want to give me your house. This is a sick joke." "It's not a joke," I said quietly. "I had the tests done at a reputable lab. The results are clear." Rachel turned to our mother, who couldn't meet her eyes. "Mom, tell him this is crazy. Tell him Dad is my father." The prolonged silence from our mother was more damning than any confession. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I never thought. I never imagined anyone would find out." My father suddenly stood his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. Without a word, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving the three of us in stunned silence. Rachel's shock transformed into rage as the reality sank in. "How could you?" she screamed at our mother. "My entire life has been a lie. Who is my real father? Does he know about me?" My mother seemed to collapse in on herself, decades of secrets suddenly exposed. "His name was Alan Mercer. We dated in college before I met your father. He came back into my life briefly when Christy was a toddler. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." "Does Dad know?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. The lack of explosion from my father suggested this might not have been the revelation I expected. "He suspected," my mother admitted. "When Rachel was born, there were comments from family about how little she resembled Marcus. We never did a test, but I think he's always known on some level." Rachel was openly sobbing now, her pregnancy-enhanced emotions overwhelming her. "So my entire life, the way Dad doted on me, made sure I had everything, was just guilt and compensation." "He loves you," my mother insisted, reaching for Rachel's hand, which she yanked away. "Whatever the biology, he raised you. He chose to be your father in every way that matters." The revelation had accomplished what I wanted, shifting the focus entirely away from my house. But I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for the web of secrets and compensations that had shaped all our lives. Rachel, still crying, gathered her things and left to find my father. My mother remained, looking suddenly older and unbearably tired. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said softly. "I thought I was protecting my family by keeping the secret." "But the secret hurt us anyway," I replied. "It created a dynamic that made me feel worthless for decades." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. And I let it happen because I was afraid if I pushed too hard against Marcus's favoritism, he might start questioning why he felt the need to overcompensate with Rachel. I failed both of you. I'm so sorry, Christy." In that moment, looking at my broken mother, I felt no satisfaction, only the hollow recognition that truth, while necessary, was rarely painless. The aftermath of the revelation was predictably chaotic. My father disappeared for 3 days, not answering calls or texts from any of us. My mother moved temporarily to her sister's house, unable to face the empty home or my father's potential return. Rachel, according to texts from my mother, had barricaded herself in her apartment, refusing to see anyone, including Gregory. I threw myself into work, the familiar refuge of blueprints and contracts, providing some stability amid the emotional earthquake I had triggered. Brandon respected my privacy but ensured our colleagues shielded me from unnecessary stress. "Whatever's happening in your personal life, we've got the business covered," he assured me. "Take the space you need." A week passed with no contact from my father or Rachel. My mother called daily, alternating between tearful apologies for the past and anxious questions about whether I'd heard from the others. I began to wonder if I'd permanently destroyed my family in my quest for truth and fairness. The following Wednesday evening, I arrived home to find my father's car in my driveway. He sat on my front steps looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd had on at the restaurant confrontation a week earlier. "Can we talk?" he asked simply when I approached. Inside, I offered him coffee, which he accepted gratefully, wrapping his hands around the mug as if seeking warmth despite the mild evening. For several minutes, we sat in uncomfortable silence, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway the only sound. "I've known since Rachel was born," he finally said, his voice rough. "Not with scientific certainty, but in my gut. She had none of my family's features. The timing of her conception coincided with a business trip I took. There were signs." I listened without interrupting, stunned by his candor after a lifetime of emotional distance. I made a decision then to never question it officially, to raise her as my own. But the doubt was always there, gnawing at me. I think I overcompensated with Rachel because I was constantly trying to convince myself that she was truly mine, that if I loved her enough, invested enough in her, it would somehow make the biology irrelevant. He took a shaky breath before continuing. "What I didn't realize, or maybe didn't allow myself to see, was that my overcompensation with Rachel came at your expense. Every time I gave her special treatment, I was withholding something from you. The acknowledgement I'd waited for my entire life landed with less impact than I'd imagined, perhaps because it came too late, or perhaps because understanding the reason didn't erase the decades of feeling inadequate. Why did you demand I give her my house?" I asked the question that had started this entire painful journey. My father looked genuinely puzzled. "I don't know. It was irrational, wasn't it? Maybe after all these years of giving Rachel everything, it became a pattern I couldn't break. Or maybe," he paused, seeming to consider something for the first time, "maybe I was jealous of what you've built entirely on your own. This house, your business, you did it all without my help, which proves you never needed me at all." The vulnerability in this admission was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. My father, the imposing figure whose approval I'd sought my entire life, was admitting to jealousy and insecurity about my independence. "I did need you," I said quietly. "Not your money or connections, just your belief in me, your recognition." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've never said this before, Christy, and I should have. I'm proud of you. What you've accomplished through your own hard work and determination is remarkable. I was wrong to dismiss it, wrong to ask you to give it up, wrong to treat you as less important than your sister for your entire life. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to hear that. It wasn't a perfect apology, it didn't erase the past or heal all wounds, but it was honest in a way my father had never been with me before. It was a beginning." "What happens now?" I asked. "With the family, with Rachel?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Your mother and I have a lot to work through. As for Rachel," he sighed heavily, "she's devastated. Finding out the truth has shaken her entire sense of identity. She needs time." 2 days later, I received a text from Rachel, asking if we could meet for lunch. We chose a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. When she arrived, the physical changes were striking. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back carelessly, none of her usual careful makeup. The pregnancy was more visible now, her loose sweater not quite concealing the growing bump. "I've been thinking a lot," she began after we ordered, "about how differently we were treated growing up. I always thought it was because I was somehow better, smarter, more charming, more lovable. It fed my ego, but it was all based on Dad's guilt and insecurity. It wasn't your fault, I offered. You didn't create the dynamic." "No, but I benefited from it," she acknowledged. "And I never questioned it or stood up for you when Dad was being unfair. I just accepted the preferential treatment as my due." She twisted her napkin nervously. The house thing that was completely out of line. I can see that now. The entitlement I felt. It's embarrassing. Who is Alan Mercer? I asked the question that had been lingering since the revelation. Have you tried to find him? Rachel nodded. Mom gave me his information. He lives in Colorado, now married with 2 grown children. I haven't contacted him yet. I'm not sure I'm ready. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, I said, meaning it. The DNA test had revealed we were half-siblings, but in many ways that biological reality felt more honest than the manufactured family dynamic we'd grown up with. I'm sorry about the house, she said after a pause. Gregory and I have been looking at apartments we can actually afford. It's a reality check, but maybe one we needed. The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship, the first time we'd spoken as equals rather than as competitors for our father's approval. Before we parted, I made an offer I meant what I said before about helping you find a place. Not my house, but I have connections in real estate knowledge about neighborhoods with good schools. Let me help in a way that makes sense. Her grateful smile felt like the beginning of a new kind of sibling relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than resentment and competition. With the house issue resolved, I returned to my business with renewed focus and energy. The project that had suffered during the family crisis, a mixed-use development in a historically significant neighborhood, became my priority. I redesigned elements to better honor the area's architectural heritage, while creating affordable housing units alongside luxury apartments. The concept was innovative enough to attract attention from local media and industry publications. "This is your best work," Brandon commented, as we reviewed the finalized plans. "Whatever you went through these past months, it's transformed your approach." He was right. The experience had shifted something fundamental in me. With the weight of seeking my father's approval finally lifted, I found myself designing spaces not to prove my worth, but to create something meaningful. The development, which we named Wilson Heritage Commons in honor of my grandfather, became a showcase project that elevated our firm's reputation. When the project broke ground 2 months later, I invited my family to the ceremony. To my surprise, they all came, my parents standing somewhat awkwardly beside each other but making an effort. Rachel and Gregory, her pregnancy now visibly advanced. Even my grandfather beaming with pride at seeing his name on the project. "You've built something remarkable here," my father said after the speeches and photo opportunities. "Not just the buildings, but the vision behind them." The compliment, freely given without manipulation or agenda, meant more than all the approval I'd sought for decades. 1 year after the confrontation that revealed our family's secret, we gathered at my house for Thanksgiving dinner. The dynamic was markedly different from any previous family gathering. My parents had spent 6 months in couples therapy, slowly rebuilding their relationship on more honest footing. They arrived together, but with a new carefulness in their interactions, the comfortable assumptions of a 35-year marriage, replaced by the conscious efforts of people choosing to stay connected despite difficult truths. Rachel and Gregory came with 4-month-old Emma, who had her mother's eyes and her father's chin. A new genetic beginning, unconnected to our family's complicated past. They had moved into a modest 3-bedroom townhouse that I had helped them find in a good school district, which Gregory had managed to afford by taking a second job and finally addressing his gambling addiction. "She's beautiful," I said, holding my niece while Rachel prepared her bottle. The baby gurgled and grabbed at my tie, her tiny fingers surprisingly strong. "We're thinking of having Alan visit next month," Rachel said, referring to her biological father with whom she'd established cautious contact via email 3 months earlier. "He's curious about Emma, his first grandchild. It's strange but not entirely uncomfortable." My father, overhearing this, showed no signs of the jealousy or possessiveness that would have characterized his reaction a year ago. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's appropriate. Emma should know her full heritage." This simple acknowledgement of reality, rather than clinging to appearances, marked how far he had come. Our relationship had evolved too. We would never have the effortless father-son bond I had envied in friends, but we had developed something perhaps more valuable. A relationship based on honest communication and mutual respect, rather than performance and approval-seeking. Professionally, the year had brought significant growth. Wilson Heritage Commons had won a prestigious architectural award for community-conscious development, and our firm had expanded, taking on larger projects, with a focus on creating spaces that balanced aesthetic value with human needs. Brandon and I had become equal partners in every sense, our complementary strengths creating a business greater than either of us could have built alone. My personal life had expanded beyond work as well. Through a community volunteer project related to our development, I had met Natalie, an urban planner with a sharp mind and warm laugh, who challenged and supported me in equal measure. Our relationship was still new, but built on a foundation of honesty about our pasts and hopes for the future. The therapy I had begun during the family crisis had continued helping me process not just the immediate trauma of the revelation, but the deeper wounds of my childhood. Dr. Winters had guided me through recognizing patterns formed in response to my father's emotional withholding, my workaholism, my difficulty, trusting others' appreciation, my tendency to prove my worth, through achievement rather, than connection. The truest measure of healing, she told me in one of our sessions, isn't forgetting the pain but finding it no longer controls your choices. That Thanksgiving, looking around at my imperfect but honestly connected family, I recognized the truth in her words. The pain of my childhood hadn't disappeared, but it no longer dictated my sense of self-worth or my capacity for relationship. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room with coffee and dessert, my father asked if he could speak. This past year has been the most difficult and the most clarifying of my life. He began, his voice steady but emotional. I've had to face hard truths about myself, how my own insecurities and fears shaped the way I parented both of you. He looked from Rachel to me. I can't undo the past, but I'm grateful for the chance to build something more authentic moving forward. My mother, sitting beside him, reached for his hand. We both are, she added quietly. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my grandfather. At 81, he remained sharp and observant, the family witness who had seen it all but spoken little. You know, he said, helping me load the dishwasher despite my protests, your grandmother always worried about you. She saw how Marcus treated you differently, and it troubled her deeply. She would be proud of the man you've become, not because of your success, though that's impressive, but because of your integrity. You faced a difficult truth and used it to heal rather than wound. His words touched something deep within me. I almost used it as a weapon, I admitted. When I first discovered the truth, part of me wanted revenge for all those years of feeling second best. But you didn't, he pointed out. You found a way to break the cycle instead of perpetuating it. That's real strength, Christy. As the last guests departed and I stood alone in my home, the house that had become the unlikely catalyst for our family's transformation, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The 5-bedroom Victorian that my father had demanded I surrender had become something different than I'd originally intended. Not just a showcase of my professional abilities or a symbol of my independence, but a gathering place for a family learning to connect in healthier ways. The truth that had seemed so devastating when revealed had ultimately been liberating. By understanding the real dynamics that had shaped our family, we had all been freed from roles we'd been unconsciously playing our entire lives. My father from his compensatory favoritism, my mother from her burden of secrets, Rachel, from her sense of entitled superiority, and me from my desperate quest for approval I could never earn. The deepest lesson I had learned was that self-worth could never truly come from others' validation. My father's approval, which I had sought so desperately for decades, couldn't fill the void his emotional distance had created. True security came from within, from knowing my own values and living in accordance with them, from creating meaning through work that mattered, from forming connections based on authenticity rather than performance. The house that had almost torn my family apart had become ironically the place where we began to rebuild. Not through surrender or demand, but through truth, however painful, and the choice to grow beyond old patterns into something new and more authentic. As I turned out lights and closed up for the night, I felt a quiet contentment that had nothing to do with material success or family approval. It came from the knowledge that I had faced one of life's hardest challenges, confronting painful family truths, and emerged not bitter but more whole. Has your family ever expected you to make unreasonable sacrifices because we're family? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the hardest truths lead to the greatest freedom. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to face your own truths with compassion and strength.